Today we're back looking at more creepy true crime TikToks. You guys love whenever I watch these creepy videos, and as per usual it's done late at night, but let's get into some good old true crime.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boyle was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband Kevin wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Hayley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Hayley is currently awaiting trial.
Well, do you want to know something? I hope both of them go to jail for the rest of their lives and rot there. If they really wanted to, they could have just, left whenever they were, caught doing it. It's just sad, isn't it? And it's the fact that they've done that to the daughter as well. I can't remember if they actually took the daughter's life. I really hope they didn't. But it's the fact that, she was talking about, "Oh, I took your mummy's life," and then wore the mum's earrings. Now, I'm so sorry. People like that are just so sick. And do you want to know something? I hope that they spend the rest of their life in jail. Notice how they were talking about how they wanted the officers to shoot them because they knew they were going to be going to jail for the rest of their lives and they wanted the easy way out. But thank God they didn't get a bullet inside of them, and now they're going to have to spend the rest of their life behind bars. Dad couldn't see the body because of how bad it was, but daughter has that memory for life, fighting for her life and her daughter heartbreaking. There's obviously a reason why the dad isn't allowed to see the wife's body, probably because it is so unbelievably bad. But it's the fact the young daughter saying that. I can't remember how old the daughter was. I'm pretty sure she was quite young. I think 8. She's gonna remember that for the rest of her life. She's got a good memory there. She's still awaiting trial for a murder from 2017. I can never get over how long the justice system takes. Exactly, if the justice system, you would think somebody who, commits a crime would either be put out of jail or set free within the space of a few months. But it took them 5 or 6 years to get a trial. I'm also pretty sure whenever a trial came up, the daughter would have had to be involved in giving her perspective. So it's that 8-year-old daughter who's probably going to be 14, 15 by the time she actually got the, trial. It's going to have to relive all of that. I understand the real tragedy is with the victims, but as a side note, I can't imagine being a tourist and walking into the house after. Exactly, that's something that really freaks me out. First of all, it's bad enough that it happened, but imagine coming across something so gruesome like that. It's just awful because I'm very squeamish. I'm telling you right now, if I found a body, I think I'd actually end it.
Here's a face that's been all over the news lately. Usually you'd see a photo like this with the title murder trial and assume that they're the victim, but not in this case.
I actually do know a tiny bit about this case. This is basically a nurse killer. So basically this woman was taking care of babies and I think she was injecting something into them. I think it might have been oxygen into their blood, and then obviously, it resulted in the babies dying, but she done it to loads of children.
32-year-old Lucy Letby has been charged with taking the lives of 7 babies and attempting to take 10 more. She was working as a neonatal nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital from June 2015 to June 2016. And this was the time span in which these infants passed away. She was finally removed from the neonatal unit after a senior doctor realised that she was the only common denominator for all of these children.
Exactly, you'd literally think it would take them a lot less time to do that. Within the space of about a year, multiple babies were dying, I think up to 20 babies. She attempted it in 10 and killed 7 of it. It's nearly 20. I don't know a lot about baby hospitals, but usually babies do die. I know about that, with them being in hospital whenever they first come to this earth. But with babies dying that quickly and, over that amount of time, you would think something suspicious is up.
Lucy Letby has pleaded not guilty on all accounts. So her defence team have said that it's just a coincidence that she was present at the passing of every child. They've also said that the passings were natural and not caused by any human interference. The prosecution, however, have presented evidence stating that the victims' lives were deliberately taken, mainly by injecting air into their circulation. Police also supposedly recovered some major evidence from her home after her arrest in 2018. The evidence was a handwritten note, with one section of it reading the following: "I unalived them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." Well, I guess, take from that what you will.
It kind of makes you think, how was she able to get away with killing that many babies, and second of all, why? And also imagine being her lawyer, like that person's getting paid to defend her and he probably knows in the back of his head that, you know, she is guilty. Because it's just not a coincidence. Like imagine having to literally defend her and make it out like she didn't do it. With lawyers, do you reckon if they're ever defending someone, they think in the back of their head, oh my god, he's either guilty or not guilty? I mean, it's just weird, isn't it? It's like, why would she do it? Obviously something was wrong with her.
This woman melted into her couch after her parents neglected her for over 12 years. On January 3rd, 2022, 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher was found naked and deceased on her parents' couch in Slaughter, Louisiana. Lacey had extreme social anxiety, severe autism, Asperger's, and other mental health issues. She attended Brownfield Baptist Academy up until the 9th grade, and then she was transitioned into homeschooling. Lacey's parents, Sheila Fletcher and Clay Fletcher, were her legal caretakers, but they literally watched as their daughter was dying. Lacey was left to melt and rot into her couch for years until she passed away. She was only 96 pounds when she was found, and she was covered in feces, urine, and maggots and insect bites. Her hair was knotted, matted, and filled with maggots, while fecal matter was all over her face and body. Lacey's bottom had ulcers and bacterial infection from all the urine and feces that was left there for who knows how long. The couch eventually began to melt away along with her skin, which then created this hole. Lacey's cause of death was from severe medical neglect, which led to chronic malnutrition, acute starvation, immobility, acute ulcer formation, and osteomyelitis, which led to sepsis. An investigator mentioned that the crime scene was so disturbing that he was unable to eat and he cried for a whole week. Sheila and Clay Fletcher insisted that Lacey chose to never leave the couch, but they were still arrested on Monday, May 2nd, 2022. They've been indicted in second-degree murder charges and may get life in prison with no parole if they are convicted. I literally felt sick to my stomach after learning about this case. Have you guys heard of it?
I think I have heard of it before, but that's the first time I've ever seen that photo. Like that photo of the couch is where that woman lost her life. Yet again, how can people be so evil? Like the mum is quite clearly evil and so's the dad. And it's the fact that they were saying that she chose to sit on the couch. You know, she literally couldn't move. Keep in mind, that was a woman who I'm pretty sure was disabled. You know, social anxiety, she didn't really like to leave the house. And then the fact that the parents let that happen to her, like they quite clearly knew that something was not up, like it's not normal. It just makes you feel sick, doesn't it? Because it's like, you don't know who could be doing something like that. I mean, if you see an old person or like an adult out and about, at home they could be going through the same situation where like they literally are holding someone in their house and they're like dying. How does a person melt in the first place? I'm pretty sure it's because she was literally stuck to it. Like that's the only way to describe it. It's kind of like whenever you get chewing gum in your hair, like whenever it's in there, you know, it's hard to get it out. And think of it, if she was literally sat in that sofa for like multiple years and she was rotting away, she's eventually gonna melt into it. That should be first degree, exactly. Like both them parents should be behind bars for the rest of their lives. And do you want to know what's even worse? It's the fact that it was her parents. Like her parents let that happen to you. Parents are meant to take care of their children and protect them, but there's evil parents like that. Wow, how did they even live her with her literally rotting in the living room? Hope they get life. I mean, they're probably used to it, you know, they're evil, there's something not right with them. Yeah, again, whenever you're looking at their mugshots, now that you know what they've done, they just do look evil, don't they? What about the smell? I mean, they probably became nose blind to it. That's what happens with cases like that. You know, usually if they're so used to someone smelling a certain way or like a certain scent, they get used to it, like they forget about it. And also the fact that like an investigator literally couldn't eat for a week, that's when you know it's bad. Like imagine having to come across something like that. It's awful. Even if she did choose to stay there, why didn't they make her get up? There's no way a person would just sit there to let themselves rot. Exactly, like it's quite clear that didn't happen. You know, the parents knew exactly what they were doing. They probably could see that she was in pain, but just let her like stay in pain. And that's what makes it even worse, is the fact that it was literally her parents.
This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years.
I mean, he shouldn't be able to get out, full stop. Yet again, it happened nearly 10 years ago. It's quite crazy to think, obviously, that woman is no longer here, but people still know about her. You know, her family live on without her. I mean, people always talk about in America how they got a gun problem, but over in the UK, we've got a knife problem. Like, that's literally the equivalent of what's happening in America. You know, someone going in and taking a gun and shooting people. In the UK, we've got kids like that stabbing people. Now, don't get me wrong, with that happening in school, it's not as likely, but it's the fact he was still able to get into the school with that weapon. And you know how whenever we're talking about how he got diagnosed with diabetes and then his mood changed, do you reckon that's why? Does that maybe do something to you? I don't know. It's quite crazy to think so many things can build up for someone to eventually snap. And yet again, he was like 14, 15. He was very, very young. I mean, if you do something like that, you've got to deal with the consequences, and the consequences are brutal.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month.
Okay, so this actually reminds me of a Criminal Minds episode. This was the one episode I was terrified of growing up. Do you ever like watch a program and like it scared you so much you still get like memories of it to this day? I think whenever I watched a Criminal Minds episode, it was from one in probably like 2004 or 5, but I remember watching it when I was like 12, so that was like nearly 10 years ago. Basically, it was about, you know, a man who would kidnap women, you know, obviously end their life and then turn them into soup and make people drink the soup. I actually looked up on Google and apparently it is one of the most scariest Criminal Minds episodes. It was like rated as the most scariest. The beginning of his TikTok reminds me of that.
On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws, and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
That's so sad, isn't it? Like, her 4 children are literally going to live without a mom. It also makes you quite freaked out to think that her ex had something to do with that. Have you ever talking to someone or, you know, like been in a relationship, got married, etc., and you've broken it off? And it makes you think, are they plotting something like that? And yet again, it was over a family dispute. You know, families argue all the time. Does it really need to result with someone like literally getting chopped up and turned into a soup? I mean, that's just freaky, isn't it? That literally is a Criminal Minds episode in real life. Okay, wow, I'm never ever marrying a man. There is way too many stories like this. Exactly like this is one of many. You hear stories about this all the time. The sad thing is they can't charge them for murder because in Hong Kong you have to have the whole body to charge them for murder, and the torso is unfound. So they literally haven't found the torso, which means someone's probably drank it with their soup. And I think what's even worse is the fact, first of all, they've done that crime, but they tried to turn her body into soup. It's like, what sick psycho does that?
Do not watch this video if you are easily disturbed. This is this sickening, very recent case of Lily Peters. On the 24th of April 2022, 10-year-old Lily Peters was making her way home from her auntie's house in Wisconsin. She was biking and she was familiar with this route because she'd done it many times before. When she didn't return home that night, her dad reported her missing to police.
That must be one of the worst feelings ever, whenever someone's meant to come home at a specific time and then they just don't come home. With me, I kind of give it like an hour-long slot. You know, sometimes my mum goes out, she forgets her phone, etc. I'm fine with that. However, whenever she's meant to come back, let's say 4 o'clock, and like it gets to like 4:30, 4:45, I do in the inside start to get a wee bit worried, because like it's unusual for people in my life to be late.
What transpired was her parents' worst nightmare. Her body was discovered the following day at around 9 a.m. Officers located a bike that ended up being Lily's in the woods near a walking trail at the end of her aunt's street, and her body was discovered shortly after. Disturbing details emerged about Lily's death. She'd suffered blunt force trauma and had been strangled. Her body had then been SA'd. But who on earth would do such a thing to such an innocent little girl? 2 days after she disappeared, police charged Lily's 14-year-old cousin, Carson Peters. He'd allegedly been riding home with Lily when the horrific incident occurred. It's alleged that he punched her in the stomach and attacked her. Now, the case is still ongoing, but he has admitted to the attack. Interestingly, his father is Adam Berger, who is pictured here. He spent 3 years in prison for being a convicted paedophile. Now, Carson's bail is set to $1 million, and if convicted, he could spend life in prison.
I mean, I hope he does. It doesn't matter. He's 14. He's still done something like that. That's the second 14-year-old in this video. What's going on with these kids? But you want to know what's quite interesting? The fact that his father was also a predator and in jail for that. Is it genetically that it can get passed on? Because, like, what 14-year-old is having them urges, especially towards their cousin? That's just awful, isn't it? Like, it makes you think what she was feeling whenever she was going through that. Like, it would be terrifying. You'd be in shock, and it's like, where did he learn to do that? It's quite scary how, you know, people aren't safe in this world, but you're not even safe with your own cousin. Nah, I'm sorry, that right there is why I just do not trust anyone.
These serial killers got caught because of stupid mistakes they made. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff here, so make sure you follow along. Dennis Rader was a prolific serial killer in Kansas from 1974 to 1991. He was called BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill, because that's what he liked to do. But he also liked to taunt the police. He would send the police letters signed BTK, which could not be traced back to his real identity. So in the early 2000s, he had been dormant for over 10 years, but he still liked to taunt the police. And the early 2000s also brought new technology for communicating. So BTK, being the mad genius he was, wrote a letter to police asking if he sent them a floppy disk, would they be able to trace it back to him? And the police answered this letter basically saying, no, we totally can't do that. So BTK sends the police a floppy disk, and there is metadata on this floppy disk that says the last edit was done by someone named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. And then a 10-second Google search showed police that Dennis Rader was the president of the council at Christ Lutheran Church. Afterwards, the police basically came out and said that if Dennis had just kept his mouth shut and kept murdering, they probably would have never caught him. Let me know if you want more of these, because there's some other idiots out there.
I mean, well, first of all, that's dumb. Like, I don't understand why people do that. Surely if you're going to do a crime, you do it and then, like, not talk about it. Usually a lot of times whenever people taunt the police, you know, they eventually get caught because the police are able to track it back to them. But you want to know what's quite interesting? He was, like, a president of, like, a church. It's fascinating to think that, obviously, Christianity, you know, churches and religion, they're all about, you know, uplifting people and being amazing, helping each other out. But he was literally doing the complete opposite. He was doing probably one of the worst things you could ever do to be part of that religion. And yet again, you know, if he wasn't a cocky idiot, he wouldn't have got caught. They probably would have never caught him. He could have continued on doing it, but yes, his ego got the better of him and he eventually got caught, and thank God for that. He was my college professor's uncle. She was telling us about him and how he was super weird before everything happened. I feel like a lot of times whenever people do stuff like that or they're guilty, you can kind of tell. I don't know, there's just like something about people who do that stuff. They're weird. It's like you can tell something's off them, and a lot of times they're, you know, completely shut off from society. They're not social, they don't have a lot of friends, you know, you can definitely tell that, like, they're off because they don't know how to interact with humans.
So this murdered Texas couple's missing baby has finally been found after 42 years. And the story is crazy. Let's take a look. So in 1981, Dean Klaus, his wife Tina Lynn, and their baby Holly disappeared without a trace in East Texas. The only clue was from an anonymous caller who said that he had found Dean's car in California. And he claimed that 3 women in white robes drove it from Texas to California. Police were actually able to track down one of the women who called herself Sister Susan, and she claimed that Dean had joined a cult and renounced all earthly possessions. And she wouldn't tell them anything else. It actually wasn't until late last year that human remains found around the same time were confirmed to be Dean and Tina's. Dean had been beaten to death and Tina had been strangled. But that didn't answer what happened to Holly. This year, investigators were searching for human remains around where Dean and Tina were found. And that's when they got a genetics hit that Holly was alive and in Oklahoma. But get this, when they were talking to Holly, they found out that she had been left on the steps of a church in Arizona by none other than 3 women in white robes. Investigation is still pending, and they are really trying to figure out who these white-robed women are. But for now, at least we know that Holly is alive and well.
So obviously it happened 42 years ago. What was that, like 1970s, 80s? I mean, back then, stuff like that was happening all the time. But something I've been thinking about recently, you know DNA whenever it comes to missing people. Couldn't companies put that DNA into 23andMe? I don't know what exact DNA they need, but like imagine someone went missing like 20 years ago and they want to know maybe if like someone's got like a random relative, like a child or whatever. They can maybe put that DNA into like the website and see if they get any answers. Wild stuff happened in the 70s. Exactly, back then people would literally leave their front doors open. That's why there were so many active serial killers. But what's quite interesting is the fact that they were talking about 3 women in white robes. Was it to do with religion? Was it to do with a cult? Like, it's quite weird. And yet again, it happened like 42 years ago. 42! 1981 doesn't feel like 40 years ago exactly. Like, it literally doesn't. It like doesn't even feel that long, and I wasn't even alive then. This breaks my heart. She never got to know her parents, so when she has the chance, she finds out they were murdered. Wait, so did she not even know who her real parents were? Oh my god, yeah, think about it, because they didn't know whatever happened to the daughter. Oh god, that's weird. Yeah, that's freaky. I would not want to be in that position. Well, anyways, guys, that's some creepy true crime TikToks. If you want to see me look at more of these, let me know definitely. Well, here's a bigger scrub and see you all tomorrow for another video.